recording. And we're going to go ahead and insert an image. So give me a second until I find them all, because I'm going to go up to create and insert image. And let me find my images where I have these stored. You know, they're basically stored in a little different place than my normal place. But, you know, I want to take a look at how to handle some of these images that have letters in them. Okay. Let me open up this because I actually have some other ones that I think might be better. Might be in here. Hold on. All right, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to start with this babies one because this is kind of a good basic one to start with, and then we'll look at some other ones. Okay, you guys should have this file in your folders, and if you don't, you know, let me know and I'll send it over to you. It's telling me it's a vector file, and it's a true WMF image. Now, these are very thin lines, so when you're looking at this image processing, it says vector file and it's in WMF. If you just say okay and insert this, you can resize, of course, here, but let's go ahead and say okay, and I'm going to go ahead and generate. And what happens is the lettering comes in just fine, but these thin lines are not going to be seen under vector. But since I just want to deal with the letters right now, I'm going to zoom in around those and we're going to start talking about what's going on. Now, these letters are vector and they're pretty clean. So let me change the color so you can see that a little bit better, and I'm going to pick a better thread catalog here. And here's what my letters look like. They came in pretty good, except, you know, up here is a little bit off. It's part complex fill. And, you know, these letters are kind of acceptable. They've done pretty good. You might not like how the B's are being formed, but you have a choice here. You could edit these letters that came in very clean from vector artwork, but these letters are also pretty large, right? Something like this on the A, I wouldn't even really worry about because you have all of these editing options. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to edit these, and then we're going to look at some smaller letters that come in with logos and how the best way to handle those letters that come in with an image, whether they're basic or they're a little more complicated, there's a better way to handle this. But let's start with these letters. These are pretty basic, and, you know, I've got, you know, this part up here that I need to deal with. Now, I have all of these letters selected and they're flashing. You can see the flashing lines. So let me go into my stitch settings or my property settings, and they're on auto judge. Anything that is auto generated is on auto judge. So I'm going to scroll over and just change them to satin. And if I click on apply, you can see I get an immediate change, right? This is now satin. Now I'm going to go back and undo that. Okay, so I can also have these selected and come down here to this quick bar, and you can see where it says auto judge, and I can just use the quick bar and say satin. And I get the effect I want on the letter A. The letter I, the letter E maybe needs a little bit of work, but the letter I is fine, and the B's maybe need some work, right? So let's take a look at how to make this lettering better. Because I've chosen satin, even though this came from an image and it's not actual lettering, I can still use the same tools that I would use to edit lettering. So I'm going to go up to my view toolbar, and you can see in my view toolbar there's, you know, view outline, and the next one over with the red lines on it is view angle. And what this is dealing with are these lines right here. Now these lines with these, you know, green nodes and the red lines control the fill direction. Right, so we're going to start with the E, and then we're going to take a look at these B's because they're a little bit different, okay? The E is very simple. If I go back to stitch view, you can see what's going on. It's stitching straight, and then it begins to angle into this corner, and it's still angled here and goes straight here and then begins to angle. And while it might look okay, it's really not the best stitch quality for a letter, and it's certainly going to cause problems if that letter is larger. So I'm going to go into view angle, and that allows me to either move these nodes, delete these, you know, lines and nodes, or add them. And if I want to straighten this out, I'm going to either right-click to get to the angle outline, or I'm going to come up to the main menu where it says angle. Okay? So what I want to do here is add a stitch direction guideline. The stitch directions control these, they're these, and this is the direction that they're stitching in. So if I want to add one, I just start out here and left click and hold my mouse button and just drag one here. Okay, very simple, right? Let me go back and I'm going to undo, and we'll do that again. I don't necessarily want to put one right there. I want to control the stitching here. So let's right click and add a stitch direction guideline. So when I come here, I'm going to not go right in this corner. I don't want to go right in the corner. What I want to do is go back a little bit further, and I'm going to go ahead and just drop that line there. I could move it over a little bit more, but if I want this corner to stitch straight, 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 and then begin to angle here, then that's going to do it. Now it's the same thing here. I'm going to start stitching at an angle and come down and go straight here and begin angling this way. Well, if I want to control that, I would do the same thing here. I would just draw that line over, right? Left click and hold your mouse button down and drag that line. Now what I don't want to do is get these too close. So I'm going to press escape, and I might move this one just a little bit down, and if I move my mouse over these little nodes, I get, a bullseye cursor, and that's going to let me drag these nodes. Okay, now let's go ahead and hit generate, and you can see the difference. That, don't worry about this stitching effect here. This is stitch shortening. It's not going to show up when you sew it. It shows up in the preview because it's trying to deal with the layers of thread, but it's really not going to show up. Okay, let me go out of 3D view and turn off my image so you can see this. Okay, what's happening is these top layers are going to stay going the length, but so that there's not, they're going to stay on top and cover up these stitches back here, but so that there's not this bunching of stitches in this point, which would make your fabric warp or wave, it pulls the stitches underneath back, and it's called stitch shortening. All right, so let me go ahead and turn my image back on and go back to 3D, and I'm going to go, zoom out here a little bit. All right, so the E is going to look a lot better now on this corner when it stitches. I still have the problem down here. So, I would have done both of these corners at one time. So I'm going to go back to View Angle, right click, and I'm going to add a stitch direction guideline. And to do that, I'm just going to left click and hold that mouse button down, and I'm going to drag it and then release the mouse button. And the same thing over here, left click and drag that mouse button down and drag it. Now I don't want to put it right in the corner because that's just, too many stitches coming into that corner. Now remember to hit escape, and I am going to move that one just a little tiny bit because it's a little close to the corner for me. Now let's go ahead and hit go. So now I've got those straight. It navigates the corner, it's going straight, it navigates this corner, and it's going straight, and that's going to be a better stitch out. Now if you would rather your bees went over top here rather than this, then you need to use a different editing tool. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select one of these bees, and I'm going to zoom in on that bee. Okay, and you can see here, that's kind of where the problem is, right? So let's go into View Angle. And what I've got is, these are a little bit crooked, the way this is being handled. If I want this bee to come over top here, you would think you could just add a direction guideline, but when I go to move this, I have this solid black line. That is called a block line. And what it's saying is, this is how we've defined the letter. This part of the bee is, going to be in this, here's a block, here's a block, here's a block, here's a block, this is a block. And that's where the problem is. This is a block, but this is a block, okay? So if I want to change that, I'm not going to be able to do that here for this letter. What I can do is use my outline editing. So I'm going to go into View Outline. When I go into View Outline, it's like View Angle. I can have an outline menu up here, but I can also right-click and get to my menu. Now I'm going to go ahead and, I'm in edit outline mode, and I could do this divide thing, but let me go ahead and escape for a second. I don't quite like how this is looking, okay? It's not very even. It's going to cause me some issues, right? This section right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into edit mode, and on your IDS system, because this is the beta, I have a pointing hand on mine. You have a triangle with a red node. So go ahead and click on that triangle with the red node, and you can go ahead and move over these nodes. And I'm going to just pull these so that they're a little bit cleaner, and maybe a little bit straighter here, right? And the same thing here, I'm just going to go ahead and pull that node up so it's a little bit straighter and a little bit cleaner around the inside of that B. I still need to chop this up, and I'm going to go ahead and turn off my image. See what I've done here? I've moved this so it's a little bit neater, and I'm going to try to keep that pretty straight here. And, and the same thing here, I'm going to try to keep that line fairly straight, just so it's a little bit neater. Now, I've got this down here that looks pretty unneat too, and if I just right-click my mouse and hold my mouse button down on this line between these two nodes, I can curve this. The same thing over here. If I want to not curve it as much, I just right-click and move it, right? But I've got the same thing up here, so just right-click and just, hold that mouse button down, just slightly curve it. That's going to clean up the inside of this B a little bit. All right, so let's go ahead and hit go so you can see what's going on. See how much that looks a little bit neater and cleaner, right? Well, let's go back to View Outline. We still have this part to change. Well, in order for me to get this part to stitch the way I want, I'm going to go back into View Outline, and we'll go ahead and just maybe straighten that up a little. To get this to stitch on top, I'm really going to have to look at cutting this, okay? And that's pretty easy. As long as I can line up these nodes pretty well, see these two nodes, then I can cut that very easily. I'm still in my View Outline, so I can either use the outline menu up here, here's my outline menu, right? Or I can right-click and I can say, you know what, let's go ahead and let's divide this with a line or divide it with a curve. In this case, I'm going to use the curve, and here's why. The curve can be straight or the curve can be curved, depending on what I do with my mouse. So if I right-click something, I get a curved point. But it gives me more control here. I need to get to this point cleanly, right? So I'm going to left-click out here. See my control point? And then I'm going to come right in on that point. And if you want to be even more precise, when you're doing that, zoom in where you're cutting. Because then I can say, okay, outline, divide it with a curve, and I can place my point here, and I'm a little bit closer on the view to this point here. So I'm going to hit that point with another left click. And then I can either right click here or I can left click, down on this point, right? And it's just giving me a little more control to be able to come out to the outside here. Instead of trying to cut that super clean, I'm not going to be able to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this straight, and then we're going to edit that to do what we want it to do. So once I'm done, I start on the outside, I hit that point, and then I hit this point here because those are, I want to be as precise as possible, and then I place a point on the outside. And I've decided to just go straight and not use right clicks, so I use all left clicks. I press enter. Now I've got this cut, okay? Now this is still one piece, but I can come over here and start to edit these nodes. And if I get that message, I can say no. I can zoom in real close to these nodes if I want to. And, if you've got one selected, just come over here and select. But, it gives me the ability to pull things or to delete things. And if you get that and you say, yes, it's no big deal, I'm going to go ahead and delete, and then I can just pull that, how I want it, right? And let me zoom out so you can see for a second. All right, so, there's my full B. Now I can straighten that out just by clicking. I'm going to not worry about that for a second. But I can also get to these nodes and pull these apart. Okay? And, if you've got multiple nodes here, you could delete them. What I'm looking to do is to catch this line right here and curve it a little bit. And then I'm going to bring it down here. And I can still curve just a little if that's what I want to do, right? And I might come up here and also, look at some of these points up here and delete them, because I can always move them around. But if you run into a problem like this, just undo. It's not that big of a deal. Okay, now what I need to do here is I am going to zoom in, because while I want this to curve, unless I split this completely apart, I really want these lines to go like this. And I'm going to go ahead and say yes, just for the simple fact that really I am overlapping here. Now, I've made this a little bit more severe, so maybe I'll straighten that out just a little bit. But you can see what's going on. I've got these two lines that I'm just trying to line up. All right, so let's zoom out a little bit And I'll go ahead and leave that. I would edit that a little bit more, but there you go. Now I've got this controlled a little bit better. See? Now, you're wondering, well, that looks pretty cruddy actually, Bernie, because, here you go, that B section's not where I want it to be. Well, then you control it with your in and out points. If you want this section to be underneath, start here. If you want this section to be on top, end on this section and say go. And you're going to get a little bit cleaner here. Okay, now, like I said, I would edit this, and to be honest, I'd go into View Outline, and, I'd probably come in here and say, you know what, let's edit, adjust with new points or adjust with an arc, and I would see if I could catch from here to here. And there's my line, so I can arc that better, and even though I get that message, I'm going to say yes, and then I need to look at this line, and that's where your nodes are going to come in. Okay, that's where you're going to come in and get this node and pull it down. And then arc it back up with the right click. Okay, and even if you get that message, it's kind of annoying, but you can get a better effect here. Ready? Our B is looking pretty good. Now, for those of you I completely lost on that, I'm going to come over here and I'll show you this B. It's going to be the same thing. These B's are exactly the same. Being really brutally honest though, once I got one of these done, I absolutely would just move that over, right? I'm not really going to worry about this so much. I'm looking at my in and out points. Maybe I move that in point there, see how I get a better effect once I move that in point. See? And maybe I'll go ahead and generate. I might clean that up a little bit, but I'm getting a better effect as long as I put that in point starting on this section. All right, so here's my other B, and I would, if this B were done correctly and I liked it, I would just copy and paste it over to here and get rid of this original one. But here's my B, so we're going to do this again. I know that I can't edit this in View Angle. So what I'm going to do is go up to View Outline. And we've got the same, kind of cruddy outline. So let's go in and go to Edit Mode. Same thing. I'm going to right-click and curve that here. I might right-click and curve that a little bit. And I might actually place a left-click here and go ahead and bring this down straighter. And if there's a curve there, you just right-click and you can straighten it out. And right-click here to curve it if you want. Okay, so now I've got a little bit cleaner B, right? And, same thing here. This one I could probably just pull up, but I'm going to try to line up these points when I do that, because that's where I'm going to have to divide. And then I can right-click and pull that and curve it as desired. Same thing here. I can right-click and curve that. And, there's my little bit cleaner B, right? It's a little bit neater, but this makes it a little bit easier to divide. You can also right-click on this and say Smooth, and sometimes you get some smoothing that you don't quite want. So if that happens, just say Undo. But there's my B, and now I'm going to divide this. Let me go ahead and generate so you can see what's going on. See, I've got a cleaner inside now. Let's go back to View Angle, and I am going to zoom all the way in here because that's where I'm dividing. And here's where my problem is going to be. Like when I look at this, I know it's a problem, right? And I can do it a couple of different ways. I'm going to go into that edit mode, and I can take a look at this. I can say, wow, that's going to be a problem. Maybe I arc that a little bit more. Maybe I pull this up a little bit more. And maybe I pulled this down just a little bit more. Okay, remember we had some problems over on the other B, right? So, the reason I'm doing it this way is so that you can see, there's the first way to do it so you can just kind of get used to it, and then there's looking at it and kind of analyzing what needs to be done if it doesn't do exactly what you want. So now I can say, okay, right click, and let's divide it with the curve. Left click here, and if I really want a curve, I can right click and kind of follow that curve, come down here and left click, and I'm still not going to get a huge curve, but if I really wanted to, I could do this. Follow the line and go down here. As long as I end on the outside of that red line and press enter, there's my curve. Now I have the ability, remember to press escape to turn off your tools, but now I have the ability to really, look at this. How do I clean this up? Does this need to be there, right? And, the same thing here, I'm going to try to match those up. Here, I would say, okay, let's go ahead and let's maybe pull that down a little bit. Let's curve this just a little bit. And let's go ahead and zoom out on that letter, right-click off to the side, and, I have to clean this section up. So before I forget to do that, let me zoom in here. I do have to clean this up and match these because it's one piece, okay? So, and I'm going to keep getting that message because it's one piece. I am overlapping outlines. And I might even maybe smooth that a little bit. All right, so this is the same way we did it, right? Let me zoom just on that, and I'm going to go ahead and hit go. So there we go. Then we're back to the same thing. Move that endpoint. You want to make sure that the endpoint is going to start on this section right here, and you can move your out point so that it's going to finish out on the top of that. And again, if you have to, move that endpoint around, right? Now, there's another way to do this that is an additional step, but it's going to help you with these letters. And these are things that you really need to practice if you're going to use letters that come from an image, right? View outline, we've already split right here. Well, let's make this a separate piece. Let's just divide it with a line, right? Pick some place that you can match up, like right here. Press enter. Now what I've got is this, and they're two different pieces. And I have more options, okay? Now I can use outline and say, you know what? Let's adjust this with new points or a line or an arc. And I'm going to do new points, and I'm going to go from here to here. And this is the line I'm going to adjust. So I'm going to go ahead and left click on it, and then I'm going to follow my curve. Right click, and I'm going to smooth this better and press enter, right? Now I've got this piece, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to clean this up. Let's go ahead and we can, we could adjust with the line from here to here. I don't need that curve there. That causes problems with satin, right? And yes, I want to go ahead and do that. But then I'm also going to go into my edit mode and clean this up. Now, watch the difference between what I've done. I can pull this over as much as I want. It keeps telling me I'm overlapping, but that has to do with in here, right? And if it keeps doing that, then, I might want to take a look at that. But, okay, so we've got this done. Right-click off to the side and generate. Now what I'm able to do with this B is take this piece right here, the one I split, move it to the top, right-click off to the side, and hit go. So now that letter actually, because I split it apart, even though it's two pieces now, all I have to do is make sure that those two pieces are going to stitch in a logical order, and I can get that letter to do anything I want, even though it came from an image. Okay? So that's how you handle some basic letters from an image. All right? Now I'm going to stop for a second and see if you guys have any questions on what I've shown you, because I know, I get this question all the time. How do you handle letters from an image? And, it's just something that really, you have to kind of, play with it. That's really the truth. Each lettering system is different. So if you guys have any questions, find your question box and go ahead and ask. Okay, does that make sense what I'm showing you? Okay, so you guys are good. You guys are awfully quiet. All right, so good. I got a couple responses that it makes a little bit of sense. Okay, now these were some basic letters. I've had some things come in that, people are saying, well, I have this problem. I can't fix this and I can't fix that and I can't, and, those are a little bit more complicated, but you're going to do the same process. Practice with these basic letters. Now, the other option you have, if you have a letter that's a basic font, use your letters. Click on the insert text box, that little A up here, or go to create text. And this is pretty much an Arial font, right? So, babies, there we go. I might need to bold it a little bit, but let's go ahead and insert this first. And let's go ahead and hit generate. And, this is a little bit wider I probably need to bold it just a little, right? So we go ahead and bold that. And, I'm getting closer and closer to that font. And then I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to say, well, you know what? Babies needs to fit in like this, right? I'm going to line those up and drag it over and say, well, babies needs to be maybe a little bit longer. And, oh, these letters are a little bit wide, but, they weren't quite right when they weren't bolded, right? You can go back and try to unbold them, or you can do this. Lining these up, to use these little nodes, because we've gone through lettering, I can just left click and drag those, right? But making these letters match exactly, if that's what you need to do, can be done as well. With your letters, left click, ungroup them. Now I still have the same problem with the B's, but I can drag those across, and I can go ahead, let me zoom in so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just resizing each individual letter, right? Sometimes it's easier in view outline to resize those letters, but I can do that. I can resize them to fit what they need to fit just by ungrouping and dragging these around. If they have to be exact, even on this S that's not exact, well, I'm in view outline, go to edit mode so you can see the original lettering behind it, or the original image. Hold on, let me go ahead and get this restarted. Then, then you can just basically use that to reshape. Let me go ahead and say yes and get into this. Okay. All right, so let me insert babies again real quick. And I bolded this, so let me go ahead and bold it. All right, now I'm going to zoom in around here and pull that lettering down. But literally you can take, I'm not going to reshape everything, but, I'm using these things to put it in place, and I'm using these little nodes to fine-tune where these go, these little diamonds underneath. I just left-click on them until it turns green, and I drag it over, right? Same thing here, left-click and drag it over. And I can do that on the line of lettering, or I can actually come down to my line tool and ungroup. When I ungroup, then I can get to each individual letter here. And we were working on this one, so let me zoom in around this S. And I'm going to right-click on the S. I'm going to go into View Outline and then Edit Mode. And the reason is I can see the outline of that S behind it. And, this I would probably move over a little bit more. But if you really had to be exact, go to Outline, Adjust with New Points, and say, what, from here to here, this line needs to be adjusted, and then follow the outline that you need to follow. Those of you who are used to manually punching, you would manually punch this, but, if you have something that's really close, then just use what's really close. And I would go ahead and make that a little bit further. I could say, well, just from here to here, right? And pick this line and then just continue to adjust following the outline of my image. So if I have something that's pretty close, then, I can adjust it as needed, right? And you can see that's a much better shape now. All right, so do you guys have any question? Sandra, I'm actually not going to cover the small fonts right now. We do have a video in the IDS page for the small fonts, and I will be sending out a newsletter. I'm kind of behind on doing that, but I'm going to have to do that before I leave on Monday for the office for training. And that's the link to the IDS page. We have a whole series on small letters that are on there. Okay, that's kind of a lesson in itself. All right, so do you guys have any questions on, this is kind of a basic thing, but it is one of the questions I get asked just all the time. At least once a day, I have somebody who sends me an image and says, I've got these letters that just won't behave. So let me know if you guys have any questions on what we've done so far. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and I'll close this out and open up a new image. And I do have to find, I'll probably just pull in that one image that I have. But mainly because it has, you know, lettering on it. It's not great lettering, but here you go. It's got lettering. You know, it's coming in as a scanned. You know, I'm going to go ahead and just lie and say it's simple artwork and go to auto select because it's real simple. You know, there's his glasses, you know, there's the outside of the glasses, you know, there's the color of the body, you know, here's the background color, and here's the geek logo, and then tagline, right? So I'm going to go ahead and say okay and insert this. Now, I'll say it's 125. It's about 4 inches, right? Because this was scanned, you know, I have some cleanup in here, right? But I'm concentrating on the letters, so I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of this and this section because I would handle this a little bit different, but here's my letters, right? This small letter down here, when I hit go, the geek logo probably turns out to be kind of okay, right? It's not great. But that tagline totally stinks, and you can see like there's the colors. There's this like gray that's in there, and if I get rid of that gray, you know, the letters still aren't great, right? It's just not good, and you can see it's broken up into pieces, right? You know, here's my G, it's solid, but you know, I've got like all these little pieces down here, and that just totally stinks. So, you know, I would not use this at all. I would do it like this. Create, insert the image. I'm going to insert that image, and I'm going to insert it as a template. And here's why. I don't want to use that lettering at all. It's not good. I think I made that too big. Hold on, let me double check. Nope, I'm good. Okay, so here we go. Here's our geek logo. Now, you know, real quick on the logo creation, if you guys have been in the webinars, you know that when you have an image like this that's scanned, right, and I'm hitting the plus symbol to make it, you know, kind of darker so you can see it, that, you know, you can either manually punch this or, you know what, you've got this magic wand, right? So just use the magic wand. Come over here and say, all right, I want to do the eyes first, and you can see how pixeled that JPEG is, right? And here's your tolerance box. Let's slide that over. Well, okay, let's look what's going on here. Let me cancel. I'm going to zoom in so you can actually see what's going on when I do this. Magic wand, click on this, and I get like this one little kind of pixel area because you can see all the pixeling in here, right? Use your color slider. Get it to select everything that you want. You can slide it a lot, you can slide it a little bit, depends on what you need. If you go too far, you're going to get everything. Okay? This is just about right. But now I've got these holes here, so if I slide that over on my noise slider, the hole in the eye closes. See what happens? See the flashing line? See those flashing? Well, that's too small. I don't really want that. I want this. So there we go. I come over here and get this one. And if you miss, go ahead and just cancel and go back. And I say, okay, so now I've got those filled. So I'm not going to go through the whole logo creation because you guys can play with that, and we have some videos on that. But this is the lettering I'm talking about. I'm not going to try to create this lettering. I could use a magic wand until the cows are blue, and this is just really pixeled. I'm not going to get the quality I want. So why not use your lettering? I mean, this is, you know, basic lettering. It's not real wide. And let me move this over so I can see what it says. Geek logo, right? I'll take off the bold here. It'd help if I could spell, huh? Geek logo. Okay, here's my geek logo, and here's this neat little feature called small lettering stitch. Depends on how big this is. This probably doesn't require that small lettering stitch, to be honest. And I'm going to ignore that for right now. Now, the tagline's another story. All right, so let's go ahead and say geek logo. I'm going to zoom out, and I'm not even going to worry about really what size it has to be. You know, that looks like the lettering is close enough. I'm just going to go ahead and start scaling it smaller. Bring it down here, and I'm going to zoom in around this. And if I need a little more meat to this after I size it, I might. Whoops, let me undo. Let me get back to my geek logo. But I'm going to use these little boxes on the side to size the letters to what they need to be. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and generate because it's not perfect, but we're going to fix that, right? So there we go. I've got enough meat in those letters. They're going to be fine. Now I'm going to ungroup them and go into View Outline and Edit Mode. Sorry, not 3D, but Edit Mode. And I'm going to start looking at these letters. What do I need to do with them? What needs to be fixed on these letters to make it match? That curve's not that big of a deal. This is kind of a big deal. I'm just going to pull that down, right-click on that mode, delete it, right-click, and straighten that out. Up here, that's kind of a big deal too. It kind of cuts off here, right? All right, right-click, divide it with a line, cut it off right here. Come over here, and you would have to right-click off to the side and right-click on this piece and delete it. But then just go back and right-click on this, and you've got these nodes that you can just pull to match up to what you need to match up, right? Maybe a little curve here, maybe a little curve there, but you know, you're getting this logo matched up. You know, that's more straight. You know, now you can say, well, you know what, let's go ahead and, wow, this really needs adjusted. So outline, adjust with new points, go from here to maybe here, you know, so I can get that all taken care of. You might as well, right? Left click down here to make the point better, and then right click around here. And then, you know, left click where it needs to be straight here. Or you might want to left click here first and then left click to make that straight and press enter. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and generate, and there's my G, right? The rest of these letters, let's go into View Outline. If I left click on these, you know, I can just scale them, right? Same thing with this one. You know, I can scale it if I want to. Here's my letter. You know, it's a little hard with the logo sometimes behind it to see it, but you can fade that out. And, you know, just work on these letters. I mean, you can use your arrow keys if they need to be taller to match. You can make them taller. And you've got all of these options, right? Now, I'm going to go ahead and zoom out because I think you kind of get the idea on that logo, right? I can make it as close as possible by using these edit tools. But sometimes using the image is really not going to give you what you want. Now, this little tagline down here, you're going to want to use the small lettering. So you're going to go into Insert Text. And I'm just going to type the same word, tagline, right? I'm not going to make up a tagline. That's pretty small. I'm going to want to use that small lettering stitch. I'm also going to probably just automatically take this down to about 10. And say OK, generate it, and I'm going to bring it down here. And here's where you're going to have to make a decision. You can't really stitch effectively any lettering that's under 1 millimeter. So measure, go into View Outline, go up to your ruler, and come over here and measure how wide this is. Okay, that's 1.17 millimeters. So looking at this tagline at that size, it's not going to go well. I can come up here and say edit, and you know what, make it like 7.5. But at this point, that's about the smallest you're really going to be able to get and be able to display or stitch lettering of that size. You will definitely not be able to get it from the image because that image is just not going to be clear enough. Jackie, how I'm scaling the letters is, there's a couple different ways. If I really want to just match something up by size, right? What I do is, you know, I'll just insert the letters, right? There we go, 10. And bam, there we are. There's the 10, right? Now, if I know that that's too big, you know, I'm looking at this, it's too big, I go into Edit, and here's my size. And what I do is go down to 7.5. You're not going to want to make lettering smaller than that generally, right? So I go to 7.5 and hit OK, and then I just hit Go and regenerate. You can see it scales them that way. Now, the other thing I can do, see these black bounding boxes? If I hold the Shift key and drag on one of the corners, I scale it from the center out. If I just want to scale it, you know, on any of the corners will make it larger or smaller. these sizes, or the boxes on the sides or the top and the bottom, make them taller, shorter, or, you know, jam them together. So there's multiple ways to scale. Now I get the same result if I come down here and I ungroup my line of lettering. Then each letter is going to have that set of boxes, and I can do the individual letters that way. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pause for a second, see if you guys have any questions. You guys are good. I know, a lot of you, end up with these images with these really wild fonts. And, using these editing tools, get comfortable with view outline. There's also another trick. If I really edited the outline of something and it comes back and it's got these really awful satin stitches, well, don't panic. Come down, just select it, right? Go to complex and come back and go to satin. And that'll reset your blocks and convert those blocks back into their right position or into better positions. So, all right, let me go ahead and stop the recording so this isn't too big and we can get it